Okay, here's my sort of hot take on this amp right at the beginning of the video, so you can decide whether it's something you want to see the rest of. This is a small combo amp made by Swart. It's about 18 watts, 6v6 power tubes, but you can change them to L6 without biasing. It's cathode bias. That would give you some more headroom and a slightly different feel, I would imagine. What is it like in style? Well, Swart do their own thing in a way. They sort of, I know there's a sort of idea of the Gibson amp heritage, and it's very tweedy in that way. That's how it feels to play, right? It's got some great upper mids going on. It can get quite growly, but there's not a lot of gain on tap. Now, I really like this because there's a sort of really old style, low gain feeling to this amp. And when you push the volume and the reverb, you get this big, beautiful brash sound. But there's some nuances to this. Now, this particular amp is a master volume amp. That's what makes it stand out against some of the other amps. How good is that master volume? We're going to find out later in the video. What sort of guitars does this work best with? I have a very definite opinion about that. And yeah, I'll show you some nuances of the reverb and things like that. So let's crack on. This is quite an unusually shaped combo amp here. And to be honest with you, aesthetically, I wasn't sure at the beginning, but I've been playing this for about 2 weeks. And if it takes this shape to produce this sort of sound out of quite a small amp, then I'm all for it. I think we should plug a Strat in and have a look at this Swart amp. I'm going to tell you a whole lot more about it in a second. And actually, I just wanted to point out that in those aesthetics there on a Swart amp, they've got the handles so right. This is an old early 60s Gibson amp here with that really robust looking handle. And here's another early 60s one again with a similar type of handle. So I really love what Swart are doing with theirs. So today we've got the Swart Antares Master, and I've got to say, I've had this for a couple of weeks. I wanted to wait a couple of weeks to use it before I did this video, and it's been seducing me quite a lot. Now, it's a pretty small amp. This is the smaller cabinet. There is a choice of 2, but it's also quite a uniquely shaped thing. It's quite cuboid. It's not that small. It's not massive either. It seems like a actually very useful size. Now, there's quite a lot of controls here, and Swart are quite idiosyncratic, so I'll just run you through this. What makes this amp very usable, we'll start on this side, the master volume. Now, it's not always engaged, which is great. So at the beginning in that clip, it wasn't engaged. If you pull it up, it's engaged, and push it down, and it's not. So basically, if you're using this volume here, you're pushing the pre and post sections, whereas this is a pre-phase inverter master. So it's just lowering that volume really simply, but it sounds really good, and you're going to hear more of it later in this video. The tone is like a treble cut tone. This is one of those amps where there's not a lot of tweaking required. It's a lot of it is down to how you use your guitar and how you play, and it's not that finicky, which I really like. It will produce a great sound pretty much out of the box, and you can almost set it and forget it just with little tweaks, and especially using this little EQ switch here. Now, I need to, it's not actually written down which order this goes in, but you have an EQ switch here. It's not technically an EQ switch, it's sort of rebiasing the first preamp tube, I believe, to get different sort of sounds, but you have basically like a flat response, and then like a full boost, and also a low cut. I'd assume the low cut is at the bottom, the full boost is at the top, and I had it in the top position. Again, you'll hear that. I'll flick through it in a minute. Then we've got the space, which is the reverb. Their reverb sounds great. I wonder if they order things differently compared to a Fender. It's got a different sound overall. It's less sort of granular and splashy, and you could really turn that reverb all the way up and it's going to sound great. So we'll play around with that. Speed and depth is the tremolo. This is like a bias tremolo. It's warm, the speeds are great, and as I said, we've got the master. Now, this is one of those where I really need to like show you what I mean by playing things, because I don't have a history with Swart amps. So I can't really just tell you things off the top of my head. So okay, so first of all, I'm sorry to any Little Barry fans or Barry Cadogan fans. I've got less than an hour under my belt trying to learn that intro to that song. What's it called? Why Don't You Do It? Yeah, so probably made a big meal of that. But it's a great thing to learn, actually, and I'm working on it. But, right, the reverb, I need to turn it down. The reverb sounds really cool. It's massive. It can get in the way a little bit. It's an effect. It's properly an effect at that level. And when you're running the volume so high. So let's first of all see what happens if we turn the reverb down quite a lot. Then I'll put the reverb back up and I'll turn the volume down quite a lot. Let's just see how it interacts. I think that's going to give us some clues. And the EQ thing, it's really guitar dependent. I like it in the middle setting. I think with some guitars you'd do the bass cut, and in some band settings, and in others you'd do the full boost. I'm not always a massive fan of these amp boosts. There's one in the Josh Smith Morgan amp that I'm also not a massive fan of. Just cuts a lot of headroom and it just feels all a bit too something, not quite right. But we'll see with the Les Paul later. Right, let's try this reverb. It sort of rings at you a lot. Fine, it sounds pretty cool. Okay, that's not enough reverb. Okay, it's at about 11 o'clock now. Okay, let's leave that reverb there. It's not too long, the reverb, but it really snaps back a lot. So I've turned the volume from 3/4 to half the way round. So the reverb on here has quite a muscular feeling to it. I don't know if that makes sense, right? If a Fender black panel amp is very glassy and crystally, that can do this if the volume is lower, the channel volume. Once you put it up, it starts to, I feel like it must hit that reverb. So it sort of distorts it a bit, perhaps. And it's a bit more harsh, not in a necessarily negative connotation. I think this is an effect, and I think it's quite impressive, and it actually reminds me a bit of the reverb that was on that Little Barry track. It's like really percussive and impactful. So would I say it's for every reverby thing you want? Possibly not. But you could definitely live, when I say live with it, it's a great sounding reverb, great sounding amp altogether. It's hard to describe how a reverb feels, so I hope you heard that. Maybe it's very short as well, and it just sort of hits back at you really like quickly, which for this style of playing really works well. When we hear with a Les Paul, we'll see how that goes and see how the amp reacts differently. Yeah, let's move on to that. So I was going for that sort of bluesy vintage feeling there, and I think it works really nicely for that. You know, it's got a sweetness to it, an openness, and if you roll all the way up, you can get a decent amount of gain. Of course, I could push the volume all the way up, but that's how I wanted to show you how I would use it. Now what I want you to hear is this guitar and also another one just with some fuzz. They're both humbucker guitars. I wanted you to hear how well this amp copes with that, because not all small amps will cope and sort of allow the fuzz to do its thing. They're short clips, but I think they're sort of demonstrative. So I thought those both sounded really good actually, because often with a lot of, you know, smaller amps, you can worry about how fuzz will be taken, especially with humbuckers, and this was a dream, really. Now, one of the most exciting features of this amp is the ability to change from 6V6 to 6L6 tubes without rebiasing it. So it's cathode biased, and that allows you to do that. I was really intrigued to find out what the difference would be if I kept all the dials in the same places. So here's a clip with the 6V6, and then there'll be a clip with the 6L6s, and I'm just going to take you through a bit of pedal stuff with the 6L6s that will show you a bit more about how it can sound. I've got an opinion about how they both sound, and I'll get to that in a minute. So I don't really think there's anything wrong with the way this amp sounds with 6v6s in. With Telecasters and Les Pauls, you know, it grinds really nicely. You get that sort of vintage overdrive sound. So, and with the Strats, originally I thought it could do with a bit more bottom end and a bit more headroom. But when I changed to the 6L6s, I was surprised that it didn't really fill out the tone in the way I thought it would. It sort of made the top end a bit glassier, but it also, you lost a bit of the character overall. Now, you did get more headroom, but you'll max that out on the amp at some point if you put the gain up. So I then put the pedals on and I thought, okay, so it does cope with pedals really, really well. And you could probably use more pedals and more extreme settings with the 6L6s, to be honest with you, because it has that headroom. And that's what the pedals need to see, is a bit of that headroom to keep it dynamic. So it's useful for that. Is it just a gimmick? Possibly. If you're going to buy this amp anyway, being that it's not a massive amp, you're probably not doing large gigs, even medium gigs. So do you need that extra headroom, given that I think you lose a bit of the character? Possibly not. I do think it's a fun thing to play around with. Your mileage may vary, as they say. And it's certainly a cool feature to have. I would definitely try it out if you buy this amp. It offers two different characters. You know, and I can't show you everything on here, but in my experience of playing with the amp, pretty much every position you put any knob, it does something useful or sounds great or whatever. So it's not one of those amps where only the middle bit of the volume knob is useful, or if it goes too high up that it sounds awful. It doesn't. It all sounds really great. It's like a finely honed sort of thing. As I said, there's a lot with this amp. So next we should look at the master volume, and what I've done here is I've got a Strat and I'm going to play around with the master volume and show you how it sounds at different settings. First thing I'm going to do is whack this volume up, pull the master out, turn that down maybe to here. Let's just see what that does so you get an idea of that. So I always wonder about master volumes on the sort of vintage style amps where they weren't originally designed to have the master volumes. And, you know, I think this does fall into that category of the master volume is useful, but it does compromise the sound overall. Now, the great thing is that you can take the master volume out of the circuit. I think that's what makes this amp pretty special, actually, because if the master volume can't be taken out, I think it probably compromises it all the time, even when you've got it on full. But when it's out of the circuit, this just feels like a great old sort of non-master volume amp. And when it's in, yes, for me it makes everything a little bit more brittle, a little bit less soulful, and it does affect the tone slightly. But as you saw there, when you roll it back, you can easily play this in the 70 something decibel, and in the early 80s decibels it's pretty useful. And then especially in the mid to late 80s and early 90 decibels, which I think a lot of people are playing at home, you know, it's that reasonably loud but not crazy loud sort of noise level, then it's actually really good. There is a limitation, I will say that. You can't help that in this sort of design. And then if you're going to have the master on full, well, just take it out of the circuit, and it'll sound even better. It was when I was playing this Strat, I thought this amp isn't as good for Strat as it is for the other types of guitars I played through it. But I think I got to know the amp a bit better, and I didn't love like having it set on full with a Strat. I thought it was too grindy sounding, but roll it back a bit and with that reverb, it's beautiful, actually, really nice. So yeah, I think that's worth noting. So who is this amp for then? Well, I think this is a great, reasonably small combo amp that's completely unique. And so I think it's for someone who mainly plays at home. You could be playing small gigs, and obviously mic'd up, you could be playing anything really. But I think it's for someone who wants the whole package in quite a small thing. It's got the tremolo, which I haven't shown you much of because it does just sound like a very good tremolo. And so I don't need to show you that as such. It's as good as lots of great tremolos I played from the likes of Tone King and of course Fender. So what else would you expect from Swart? It's really good. It can go loud enough for lots of occasions, but you know, you'll be maxing out that headroom. It's really good with pedals, and the reverb is unique and different compared to lots of amps, and I think it's got that Gibson amp thing. And I think for sort of roots music and early blues and stuff, it's great. Having the master volume makes it extremely flexible. I like the sort of EQ boost, or also the sort of the full boost, or you can take the bass away. I like the EQ switch. It just helps you to like set it for different guitars, different ways. You know, altogether, where does this sit in the market? And I think it compares with sort of those Tone King amps, which offer lots of different functions as well, are really well built. But I think Swart now is still a very small manufacturer, and Tone King is made by a bigger outfit. And I think you feel that in this. This feels even better than a Tone King in that respect, I think. But it's quite pricey for what it is. But I do think if you've already got a sort of do-it-all Fender type amp, when I say that, what I mean is more of a clean pedal platform, for example, then this would make a great second amp to have. And on the other hand, if you're just looking for something a bit more unique with its own character and flavour, and you mainly play at home and don't need a massive amp, then I would look at this one. What I would say is it's definitely made me want to try the other Swart amps as well. I think this sounds fantastic, and it's easy for me to be comparing it to some of the amps that I play regularly, like big 100-watt 2-rocks and, you know, old Bassmans, which are all massive sounding amps. This amp, for its size, completely surprises you. It doesn't have a small boxy sound, and I think that combo shape it's got, which is unusual, it's really fat and deep and quite square. It definitely sounds a lot bigger than you expect it to. And the first time I turned it on, I was with my mate Stuart, and he was intrigued to find out what it would sound like. And we were both like, whoa, you know, beautiful tremolo filling the room, that big washy reverb. Yeah, it's pretty special, I would say. So I wouldn't hesitate to recommend this amp for someone who's maybe bored of the normal stuff, looking for an extremely well-built boutique amp, and one with lots of functions and flexibility to it. So yeah, I would definitely give this one a thumbs up. Let me know if you've got any questions in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, that really helps. And please subscribe to the channel. I'm doing a 10K giveaway, which hopefully will be in a few months. And we're giving away a set of Sunbear PAFs. They're the 59 PAFs that he makes. This is courtesy of Sunbear, so thank you very much to him. And the winner will get to choose the colour of the covers and the level of aging. So I think that's really, really cool. Anyway, see you on the next one.